This is my 286 PC, it plays subwoofer, even though that game is almost impossible to control one-handed. And here's my 386 for Wing Commander. Now, I'm not too familiar with this game's optimal speed of how fast it should run, but for me it actually seems like it's working. Now, originally I thought that that sequence was supposed to not immediately game you over, and I thought it was wrong. But later I found out that it is actually supposed to be that way, and you have to boot back into the simulator or the other one in order to get it to work. Now, to me this looks the right speed. If it's not, let me know. It's possible for me to tweak this further a little bit. And of course a lovely 486 that can run Just Jackrabbit without having to patch Just Jackrabbit. This is unpatched, no executable patches for fast CPUs or anything like that. Again, very difficult to play one-handed. But as you can see, even though I'm not really trying to play it because I need two hands, it runs great. And here's my Athlon system, which has a Voodoo 2, which means Screamer Rally is fully 3D accelerated. Of course, with the included patch of the modded driver that has the patch for this game to detect it correctly. But the Voodoo 2 is not all the Athlon system has. This is inside Windows 98, using the NVIDIA. But I left the Screamer Rally 2 disc in, so we have a little bit of an action-packed Half-Life. And last but not least, the Athlon 64 dual-core system, which runs Half-Life 2 retail version really, really well. I'll no longer leave you in the dark. Everything you've just seen was this PC. This is Project Warp, it's my attempt at the ultimate multi-booting time machine. It was inspired by a PC from Phil's Computer Labs, where he used the BIOS to clock down the CPU speed, including disabling the cache. And that way he could achieve every DOS timeline basically available. I wanted to take this a step further and see how far I could go. The attempt was not to build a period correct PC, but because everything I needed turned out to be from 2005 or a similar era, this ended up being a 2005 era gaming PC. Now, the first thing you already can see, of course, is the case. And this case is a case I found on the website of Evercase. They don't sell it anymore, unfortunately. I think they had like old stock that they could hardly sell because the PCs just look very old for the era that they built the case in. But for a retro PC, this is awesome, because I think this is a little bit of a sleeper PC. It looks older than 2005, but then it still has that subtle hint of, for example, USB ports at the front. And those USB ports then reveal that there's a little bit more going on than it seems. So let's boot it up, and as we go, I'll tell you a little bit about what's actually in this thing and how it's all working together. And once we hit Windows XP, I'll show you the hardware. If you already seen my driver installation video for this system, the hardware has not changed since I made that video. So if you've seen that video, you already have an idea of what's in here. Let's turn it on. So before I'm gonna boot into anything, I'll show you the BIOS first, just so you can get a glimpse of how this is set up. So there's two IDE controllers. There's a Western Digital spinning hard drive. We had this from an old system. Worked great, so I recycled it here. And I got a modified DVD drive in here. It is an actual NEC. What you're seeing there displayed is correct. But I've modified the firmware to be a little bit faster at burning and be region-free. So this is actually a region-free player, and as long as you're using XP, you can use whatever region you want. And I think NeuroOS is too. but they like that tweak a little bit less. This is the BIOS version. BIOS version is also very important for this system. If I go newer, there's a 50-50 chance it will never boot again until you reset the CMOS. I had to learn that the hard way. So every time you reset the BIOS, 50-50 chance the PC will boot, 50-50 chance it will give USB voltage errors. I had to manually look into every single BIOS file for that string to find that this BIOS version doesn't have that bug. So on this BIOS version, completely stable system, there's no issue whatsoever, but those A8V motherboards, apparently if you update them past this, they start giving issues. Now there's also a little bit of an unfortunate side. The USB ports used to boot somehow with USB 2.0 speed. When I got this system, it was 1.0 speed. I updated the BIOS, and somewhere along the lines I picked up USB 2.0 booting, which was amazing. Problem was, I had that USB crash function. I reverted the BIOS, I kept USB 2.0 booting, so I don't know how I got it. But then I had a CMOS crash, and it wiped the BIOS, and then it went back to 1.0, and I've not been able to get it fast since, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I'll show you the other settings that I have them at. A lot of this is just automatic. Error correction is enabled. AMD Cool and Quiet is enabled. Not that you see that in DOS, but you'll definitely notice it in XP. It's the chipset stuff, my AGP settings, Southbridge. This is the USB settings, and as you can see, that setting for like USB 2 booting, it's not there. I tried legacy USB support disable and stuff, doesn't matter. So it's none of these settings, unfortunately. And for the onboard stuff, the audio I've never gotten to work, so I just disable it. I don't want it clogging up the IRQs at all. SATA controller, I could enable this, and then I can boot, for example, Windows 10 from the SSD that's hidden in this system. It's not used in every OS. I'll get on that later when we get to them. If I enable this, I can boot from the SATA. It activates a RAID controller. Problem is that makes DOS really unstable, so I just leave it disabled. I don't need it for anything. I'll touch on that part later. LAN support I have enabled, but not with the boot ROM. And then the serial port I've enabled, and these I don't use. Like, I have a MIDI port, but obviously on the sound card, not on the built-in one. I have nothing for parallel. I do have something for serial. I emulate a modem with my other PC, and then I can have like simulated dial-up, which is really cool. These are the IRQ settings. Now these are tricky for me to get right, but they do work really well. So it is plug and play, so the OS can reconfigure it if it wants to, including the sound card drivers if they want to. IRQ 3 I had to reserve, I don't remember why. Actually, yeah, I do remember why. Otherwise the sound card goes on that IRQ, and then it's way less compatible in DOS, which I don't want. This one the sound card doesn't use. And now it jumps on IRQ 5, which is perfect. IRQ 7 I have reserved for sound card emulation. If a sound card driver wants to assign itself to 7, it's available, which they like to do in Windows 98. All of these, it can do whatever it wants, but these two are the important ones, 5 and 7. This, because that in DOS will let the sound card assign itself to it, and this one for sound card stuff as well. It is 10% overclocked, why not? You might wonder, like, hey, how did you get it then so slow in DOS? We'll get to it when we're in DOS. By default, 10% overclock, because why not? The suspend modes, I enabled the ACPI 2.0 support. These are all kind of basic settings. This one doesn't really matter which one I have it on. Here's the hardware monitor. There's one bug with my fan speed. I don't know why, maybe because the fan is too modern, but it will start whining about the fan speed. So I just ignore it. The fan works. You know, it will warn me about the CPU temp and stuff if it didn't, so I don't need a warning about it every single time. Here's the boot device properties. Now the NEC DVD drive, it has a bug where if I already have booted into an OS, including the boot manager menu, it will disappear from the boot list. Don't know why, never found a fix to it. The easy fix is just turning the PC off and on again and it will be back. Even if it's missing, every OS that supports this drive will just come back online with the drive. So I don't know what the BIOS is on about. That's just a thing. I also hope that you like me going over the BIOS. I noticed a lot of these videos usually don't. But I want to have these settings public for the people that want to rebuild this kind of system. Because I just know that if you know which settings work for me, it's going to help you if you want to build an Asus A8V system. So now that you've seen those, let's reveal the boot manager. So this is how the PC boots up. We have multiple operating systems installed, including a few I didn't show you yet. So here's my MS-DOS partition, it's FAT16, and let's boot into that first. And here's a familiar site to you that are frequenting my channel. This is Ultimate DOS, and it's installed on FAT16. Now Ultimate DOS, I'm gonna say no here because it likes to screw Windows 3.1.1 up otherwise. A pretty basic Ultimate DOS setup here. In the background I'm turning on my speakers for later. Now this doesn't have sound card support yet. And that's because there's two sound cards in the system. I have the ESS Solo 1 that I mentioned, and I have a Sound Blaster Audigy. And those combined work really well. There's no mixer shenanigans going on other than in software. So I can initialize the ESS Solo with this init script that I made. This uses a special tool to initialize the Solo without a driver. There's no residual memory, anything, which would have happened if it was on a different IRQ. The official driver would be this one, which I also have. And depending on the game, I want that official driver on or off. Usually on now that it's on IRQ 5, but back in the day when I had it on a different IRQ, this thing would sometimes fix and sometimes screw up. But without their official driver, it already works fine. Another secret trick that it does in the background is it activates only the mixer of the Audigy. So the Audigy is not taking up an IRQ, it's not taking up any memory or drivers, but it does activate the aux port pass-through, and that way I can have the CD-ROM audio connected to the Audigy, and then the ESS Solo on the back is routed to the aux in of the Audigy, and that way I only need the speakers on my aux output. And by doing that, you get this really seamless pass-through of two sound cards. So there's no trickery, it's very, very seamless, as you'll see in a moment. I can, for example, start Windows. And you already hear a little bit of audio there. That was the ESS Solo. That was not the Audigy, even though the Audigy is hooked up to the speakers. The Audigy right now is not used at all other than pass-through. So we can play some music, for example. Works great. The only downside is I'm using a generic SVGA driver because there's an NVIDIA 6800 GT in here, which is of course too new for Windows 3.11. That driver, they didn't fix window dragging yet. And the moment I start doing that, everything goes really, really bad. So I'm hopeful that they can fix that in a future driver update, and that would make the system really good at Windows 3.11. For now, because the drivers still have issues, I don't use Windows 3.11 much yet. Normally it kicks me back to the prompt. Yeah, there we go, okay. There is a little bug in Windows or MS-DOS 7.1 with Windows 3.11. It will now say that the file allocation table was bad and stuff. All you need to do is change your folder and it will be back to normal again. It's just a weird little Windows 3.11 quirk. So this executor, it's also on here. And this is a Mac emulator. Or actually not even emulator, it's more like wine. So this is now Mac compatible with Mac OS 6 software and some Mac OS 7 software, including Mac floppy disks and Mac CDs. So that also makes the system a bit of a Mac. I have Breadbox installed on here, which of course I should remember to do correctly. Now it should be okay. There we go, this is Breadbox Ensemble. Here we do have the graphics working. Of course it's not super accelerated, but their built-in driver works. And the audio is very sparse in this system. You can kind of hear it faintly in the background. So that's Breadbox. I don't know if there's any software for this. The built-in software is kind of interesting, so I decided to install this. Now, you might be wondering, okay, that's cool. It's a modern system. It has all kinds of stuff. You showed 3D graphics earlier. How exactly do you run Wing Commander on this so well? Well, for that, I made scripts. So I can type 386. The 386, if I type this command, kicks off CPU speed with the exact parameters that would emulate the 386 CPU. And now all I have to do is go to the game, start the game, and it will run at the same speed. So there's no fiddling with BIOS settings or anything at all. I could even make a little batch file that kicks it into this mode, automatically starts the game, and then turns it back to full speed if I want to. But this is now 386 mode, so this is how seamless it is for me to play a game if I want to play one, or get something else running. I'm not gonna do a whole thing again, you saw it in the preview. But it works really well, and the same for things like JackRabbit. If I need the 486, now sometimes switching back does not work, because these switchers, they sometimes get corrupted by the games. But now we have JackRabbit, and that's how I switch between everything. Again, all the ESS solo here. Now there are a couple of extra tricks that this thing has up its sleeve. Because it's an ESS solo, they have an ESFM chip in here. And that is now my favorite DOS sound chip ever made. Originally I had a YMF in here, the Yamaha card. And the Yamaha card had authentic OPL3. Or at least a part of its chip had OPL3 sounding stuff in it that sounded basically identical. Problem was, the DOS compatibility with this motherboard is not fantastic on that card. It could not do the typical pass-through, so you needed the EMM driver loaded to get it to work, and that just disqualifies a lot of the games that you want to play. And then the ESSL finally popped up on eBay somewhere, so I ordered one. Didn't get it in time, so I ordered another one, thinking the original would not arrive, and now I have two of them. So I have a spare in case I ever need to. The sound card was so close to the OPL3 that honestly I could not tell the difference. I know there's subtle differences. It's more like an OPL4 chip, an unofficial OPL4, so there's going to be a minor difference here and there. I couldn't really tell, and it sounded so good that I now had redundant cards. So it made more sense for me to transfer the Yamaha to a different system and then get the Odyssey to get way better 98 support and higher, and then keep this one for DOS. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to start it vanilla, because this is very, very sensitive program that I'm about to show you. Of course, we need to ESS init the sound card. There's a reason I don't automate this, I'll get on that later. So now I'm going to show you coolness. Now, coolness and my speakers don't really like each other. Or at least my speakers do, but not the microphone of the camera. So I hope it won't distort too much or get too much noise reduction on it. But this is what the ESFM chip can do. It's really cool. I lowered music a lot in hopes that it won't overpower the mic. This is all FM synth. There's no digital audio in this whatsoever. So that's what that Solo one can do and why I'm really happy to have it. In DOS, this card is an absolute breeze to use. Absolutely love it. In the other operating systems, I don't really have a need for it, because the Odyssey is better in those. But for DOS, fantastic. I love it so much. Up next on the list is Linux. A little detour before we get into the Windows side. This is Knoppix 4. It is from 2005 as well, and this is the Linux distribution that I remember from my childhood. And the reason I picked this is because it bundles a lot of stuff, so I don't have to hunt down period correct stuff at all. It just came with it. Now, in here, it's gonna be the Odyssey that takes over. The ESS Solo, it will probably be loaded, but it's not used, as far as I can tell. If it's the other way around, it's so transparent that I literally cannot tell. Now this is installed with the secret command to install Knoppix. It's called Knoppix-installer. And that can turn it into this little Debian-like system. And it's actually restarting some of the programs I had last open. This was a shout out to a website. I did not know Linux saved like this. I was shouting out that I had the NVIDIA driver working, because that's not normally included. It took me a while to find. It's this driver. That's the oldest or the newest driver that works on this particular NVIDIA GPU. And because I got that working, which is very easy once you have it, you just follow the wizard. And this Linux is so old that the wizard works great first try without any difficulties or workarounds. And because of that, I got the full resolution working. And we also have 3D acceleration working. So if I can find it back, we have, for example, Tux Razor. Which will, of course, not be possible to play one-handed. But you can see that the graphic acceleration works. I'll not play this for too long. Just showing what works and what doesn't. So Linux, very, very functional. Everything in Linux works on this system. So period correct Linux, all working. And yes, Linux takes a little bit to reboot. So, up to Windows 98. Windows 98, we're gonna go a tad more modern. So in DOS, we were limited to 16 megabytes of RAM. We were limited to just the Solo and just basic SVGA. There was no working 3D effects. I could technically make that work, but I don't care. Because it's not really period correct for that partition. This partition, we bumped the memory up to 512 megabytes of RAM. The limiters for this are included in Ultimate DOS. The Audigy is now the one that's active. The ESS Solo I don't even have installed. That way they don't compete for the IRQ. And now we're in Windows 98 for the late era DOS games that work better on here, and for things like the Voodoo 2, Windows 98 games. The NVIDIA is now began working. Now, the NVIDIA that I use, the 6800 GT, that's the last officially supported GPU. In fact, it is the only GPU that can do something at the very end of the video that can also run Windows 98. So this is the widest range of operating systems I can support on a single GPU. And this is, unfortunately, that I know, the only GPU in existence that gives you that range. I know there's people doing this with 7000 series cards, but it's way less stable in Windows 98 because the driver you need is way less stable than this one. This driver is driver version 7772, and this driver is the only one that is both fast and runs the Creative Goldmine demo, which unfortunately I don't have installed right now. But this is the most compatible driver for Windows 98 that you can get when that 45 driver is not possible. And annoyingly for me, the 6000 series is the one that isn't supported by that 45 card. If you're building Windows 98 and you want a really great Windows 98 PC, don't get this GPU. It is not worth it for you. If you're, however, like me, you're a software geek, and the experience that you want is struggling to get things to work as well as they do, because you want the software challenge, you want the driver challenge, and you want to design around limitations that are kind of self-imposed by the hardware choices that you're making, get this GPU if you can. It will be the best one for a time machine project like this. Unfortunately, however, the first one I had in the system died. I lasted about half a year with it, and then it got graphics artifacts, it died. There was another person on Vogons that got the same one as me at the same time as me. His one died in the same month, because it was a heatwave back then. Because of that, this system is strictly off limits for me during the hot months. I don't use it at all. I'll wait until winter before I use it again. I don't want to lose another card. I have since improved the airflow in the case, so it should be safe either way, but I'm not risking it. This second 6800 GT has now been running for about 2 years, and it's been running great without any issues that I can't work around. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background footage with Half-Life while I talk about some of the issues that you can run into with the card. Now, don't mind the crunchy boot up logo. This is just like a repacked Half-Life that has a ton of mods preloaded. It would have played the intro animation fine if I installed it from my Half-Life CD, which is currently still not in the system. It's still the race music. So, what are some of the problems with this GPU? Well, Half-Life runs fantastic, as you can see. No problem at all. If you want to run text mode DOS games, you're gonna run into issues, but only if you connect to DVI. I don't connect to DVI as a result. So mine is connected to the VGA port. It bypasses the console mode window issues on Windows 98 entirely. And it makes this GPU a lot more stable in Windows 98. I don't know why those limitations are there, but I guess DVI is so new that they only really bothered to develop support for it in Windows XP, and 98 was a bit of an afterthought. Maybe they only tested ME or something crazy like that. I don't know why it would be the way it is, but it is. So that's a limitation. The other limitation is just this driver is really hit and miss. For the newer games, like you can see, it works fantastic. For Need for Speed, Hot Pursuit, it's an absolute mess. But that we can solve with the 3D effects. That's why I got the 3D effects. For both DOS compatibility increasing, so I have 3D graphics there. And also for fixing bugs of the NVIDIA. So for me, that makes this particular combination a really good one. Because now this menu is not distorted, it's actually working correctly. If you do this on the NVIDIA, this whole menu is garbled and you can't really launch anything. So as you can see on the Voodoo 2, 2, 1, go! And yes, it's just one-handed racing games while recording, not my thing. I didn't promise you good gameplay, I promised you an interesting system, right? So that's that setup. So seamless switching between the Voodoo and the NVIDIA, as you'd expect from a Voodoo. Now the Voodoo as well has some interesting things to it. This system is a little bit too new for the Voodoo to work correct. So there's two little tricks that we need to do. And in fact, I made my own modified driver for it. Link will be in the description. If I forget, let me know, I'll add it anyway. I made my own modified driver for the Voodoo 2. The Hanks mod Win9X driver. Now, you might wonder, what did I change? It automatically installs some overclocking settings. In fact, it installs a underclock. So the clock speed of the Voodoo 2, and it's also present here with Voodoo 2 Tweaker. The creative bar needs to get out of the way. I don't want to close it because then it doesn't come back. So we'll do my little trick to get it up front. This clock speed I've modified to be only 85 MHz. Now, why is that? This system is so fast that Voodoo 2s will overheat if you don't. They get too hot. So by clocking down 5 MHz, you compensate for the speed differences, and then it runs about as fast as it normally would on 90 MHz, and it doesn't overheat anymore. So that's to protect my Voodoo 2. There's a secondary thing in the driver mod. You saw me run Screamer Rally 2 earlier. For some reason this went full screen. I'm trying to get it to not do that. I'm gonna have to put you down real quick. I need 2 hands for this. Alright. Quick switch later. This is the Voodoo 2 glide switcher that I made, and that will replace the DOS glide from 2 Voodoo versions. 5.1 has the best game compatibility that you can get. There's less bugs with that, and if your PC is slow enough, that's the one to do. Fortunately, I think it's the South Bridge that's responsible for this, might be the North Bridge. Either way, the PCI Connect is so fast, that driver will just not work. It will think it's not present, it will cause issues. Games are not going to start on this, unfortunately. I can slow down the CPU enough to where it will work again, but then the rest of the game is so slow that they're unplayable. So the second option is a slightly newer GlideX driver, and my modded driver gives you both with an option of easily switching in between. So it's the second option that I had installed, and that is the one that works perfect in DOS games. So games like Screamer Rally then work fantastic. There's unfortunately one little bit of sad note to this system right now that I don't have a solution for yet. Let me know if you have one. The game library for Voodoo 2 Glide games, they unfortunately sometimes bake the driver into the exe, and then it will be the old one that doesn't work. I don't know how to force it to use a modern driver. If you know that, let me know. If you know a better way of throttling just the PCI bus, let me know. There's no BIOS setting for it, as you saw before. So that's the sad note. I don't have full DOS Glide compatibility that I'd want, but it's about half of the games that work. All of the Windows games work, and Windows 98 in general works really well. But that is the little tidbit of going so bleeding edge on hardware support. And with that, I think we're done with Windows 98. Let's go to Windows XP. So, one step up, Windows XP. Now, you heard me mention before that there's an SSD in the system and I could install stuff on it if I wanted to, but the boot ROM is an issue. Windows XP is the first OS that's gonna dynamically use that SSD. I was always a really big fan, a little bit in a later era. It's not entirely period correct, but sometimes you just want to pretend that you installed a mod later and that it's fast, because why wouldn't we want SSD speeds, right? It's meant to be the ultimate time machine. It's not meant to necessarily be period correct in every single detail, but if you wanted it to be, just don't use the SSD and it will be. I use SSD caching technology for this. So, and yes, Steam does not update anymore. I still need to get rid of that. The system is now booted up from the hard disk drive, which is why I can boot without the boot ROM. But the SSD caching software kicked in an SSD partition where it dynamically places files when they're needed. So everything that's actually being used is on the SSD, everything else is not, and that keeps a larger amount of software fast without me needing a large SSD in it, because this is obviously a smaller SSD that got recycled for this project. It's not one of my main SSDs. I think you're going to be very curious about the specs by now, so let's give you a proper overview of the specifications. Windows XP is the first and only operating system where every component of this system is actually functional. I have a driver for everything in here, but they only all come together in XP, because right now the sound cards are no longer IRQ fighting, so even though I don't use the solo, it can be activated. In fact, the driver for it is included in Windows XP. And the Audigy obviously we want for the EAX effects and stuff like that, which did work in Half-Life. The A3D would have worked in Half-Life had I installed a slightly older version of Half-Life, because the one that I showed you in the video is unfortunately one version too new, and if it does an A3D effect, Half-Life crashes. That's not, to my knowledge, a PC bug. I have that on multiple systems. I've in fact never had it working. But if you go a version older, then everything is great. If you go the retail version, it is buggy again though. So here's the 3D Effects Voodoo 2 in XP. Yep, that's right. Modified driver again from my modified installation video. This is that Voodoo 2 driver making that card work. And then here is the NVIDIA again. This is the exact CPU and all the instruction sets it supports. And the motherboard that I'm using, including the chipsets that uses. Other highlight of this system is the network card. The network chip on this motherboard is really great because it has built-in drivers since Windows Vista, can be installed on XP and 98, and it even has DOS drivers for it. So I can use this as an TCP/IP driver in DOS, which I can use to connect this system to real DOSBox IPX servers. So I can actually do IPX over the internet with DOSBox's help, but I can also boot it into a native IPX mode for real local LAN IPX gaming. So that's both, which is awesome. And that's all thanks to this thing being so insanely versatile, and it's also a gigabit Ethernet adapter. Don't exactly get gigabit speeds, but it's definitely faster than 100 megabit. So I'm a big fan of this adapter. It's great. Of course, the display adapters, we're gonna show the NVIDIA again. This is the SSD that's caching things. This is the Western Digital hard drive again. Here's my modified DVD drive, the region-free one, and this is an emulated one. There's the floppy controller, obviously. There's the VIA IDE controller. This is the adapter that's on the Audigy. They give me Firewire, so I don't have any use for Firewire, but I do have it thanks to the Audigy. The keyboard, the mouse, which is connected over PS2. I can use USB mice, including in DOS. The problem is that DOS games overwrite the BIOS region that does the emulation for it. So then when you're playing a game and you turn a corner, it will overwrite the mouse drive and the mouse stops working. So PS2, very, very useful to have there. This kind of confuses me. That would be the Voodoo 2. Maybe I didn't install it, but it did pick it up. You've seen it work before in the modded driver installation. I guess I just forgot it this time. If we can, I don't know if I have the driver on disk already. Because if you didn't see that video, do I have it installed anywhere? No, I don't. Well, if you want to see the coolest driver installation ever, look at the other video, because it has a really cool installation for that one. Here's the Athlon dual core, and of course now that we're in XP, it's the first time this actually becomes a dual core. We're not 64-bit yet, 32-bit OS, but it's a dual core at least. And of course the RAID controller. Now the RAID controller is unfortunately also the SATA controller, and that causes so many more compatibility headaches than a modern system. Only way you can install an OS on that thing is by also loading the driver, otherwise you just get problems. And here's the sound cards, so there's the ESS audio drive again, there's also the Audigy, and the Audigy handles the game port, as well as the ESS. I have my game controller hooked up to the ESS when I use them. I didn't for this video because that gamepad is a little bit hijacking in the games and it would have made some of them hard to record. And of course USB 2.0, USB controller support, which is also USB 2.0 in 98. And I also have USB sticks working in Windows 98 with the modified driver, and I even have Xbox 360 controllers working in Windows 98 with the modified driver. As far as game performance, you saw it a little bit in the other video. I'll just use a little command to skip ahead a bit. So we might as well go straight to the canals because it's a little bit of a more intense section. Actually, not that one. How about canals 5? I thought it would be the airboat section, but apparently not. Oh, apparently this is also not the canal section. Okay, we'll just do D2 then. Coast will work. That's also an open area. There we go. And as you can see, very solid frame rates, even though it's the open area. And this is full screen. It's not full HD, it's one resolution below that. It's like the 1610 version of full HD. But very, very solid frame rates here. So that's XP. Whole system comes together here. And the other fun part, you saw it in the modded driver video, is that the Audigy now uses an Audigy 2 driver with the Audigy 2 utilities, because I found a modded driver for it that was backwards compatible. And video-wise, we went to a different one since that video. I've done much more testing. This is driver 260. It is the only driver, like one of the latest drivers that still renders that version of Half-Life 2 correctly. A lot of the Half-Life 2 ones start bugging, or they miss textures on modern GPUs as well. That's because NVIDIA screwed their driver up. This driver is still correct, while simultaneously being one of the newest. So this has the widest range of games. It's way better than the Windows 98 driver. And it's very, very stable. Displays everything that I've thrown at it. It's great. Time to go up one last step. I have one more thing to show you. Windows 7. This kicks the CPU into full gear. Now it's 64-bit. We do lose some hardware devices. The Voodoo 2 doesn't work anymore. We don't have a driver for the Voodoo 2, but let's face it, who needs a Voodoo 2 in Windows 7, right? If you want to play those games, you're going to play Windows 98 or Windows XP. You're not going to go all the way up to 7. The games will probably not even work right anymore. Of course, if you want to do it on a modern system, you'd use something like NW Glide. I could, but it's silly on a system like this. You just reboot to something older. This is also the OS that I use for things like file copying, CD burning. This was Screamer Rally that I burned for the video. There is the Audigy working. Now, you might wonder, hey, Audigy 1, Windows 7? Yes, yet another modern driver. The driver has been modified from a way more modern PCI Express Audigy card, and works fantastic on the Audigy 1 as well. So we kept sound, we have the Audigy working, which means that at least one sound card works. The ESS Solo we also lost, which makes the system very capable in the Windows 7 era, even though obviously for a Windows 7 PC it's gonna be slow. Like I said, I had one more thing to show you. This is Crysis. Can this DOS PC that ran all the old games run Crysis? That's the question. Can it actually do it? Or is this gonna error out and am I faking you? We'll see. The intro video works. Fortunately not skippable. That I can... Oh, that one was skippable. Okay. So EA finds its own logo very important and not the one of their partners. Can't skip this one either. There we go. Let's load a game. So we don't have the boring intro video that it for sure is gonna run because it's a video. This is the Crysis performance of this system. It's not rendering now, is it? It's very, very dark. Looks like the monitor calibration was a little bit off. I must have nudged that by accident. But it is actually rendering, it's just very dark in this sequence. Now, it's not the smoothest, but I can at least say this DOS gaming PC plays Crysis. It plays it decently well. It's actually the minimum specs listed on the box as far as the GPU goes. If you get a 6800 Ultra, for example, this project with this range is not possible. It won't have the shaders. It cannot run Crysis. This is the only GPU I know of that can run both Crysis and Windows 98 with all the DOS compatibility in games like Commander Keen, etc. And the CPU, of course, is fast enough for this game, as well as slow enough for everything I've showed you so far. This is the pinnacle of this project. This is the very upper end. I wonder if I can activate like the flashlight. I've got the key. I'm sure they'll tell me in a moment. This is actually running reasonably smooth right now. So that's the range I managed to get. Up to Windows 10 32-bit, 64-bit Windows 10 doesn't work. That's why I just kept it at Windows 7 64-bit. It runs Crysis, but it also goes all the way down to MS-DOS 7.1 with 286 games. I think that's enough for now, but you get the point. Completely seamless retro gaming fun. No emulators used for the entire video. All hardware. It's also why I like shooting them uncut. It saves me editing efforts, and it just shows you what it is like using this thing day to day if you want to have some fun with the retro gaming system. This has been by far my favorite retro PC project that I've ever done. I own like 2 other retro gaming systems, 3 if you count my previous Windows XP 7 one, but this was the pinnacle of what I wanted to do. I've always been fascinated by those multi-booting systems, and this was my best take on it. I know there's someone on Vogons that goes even further. He goes as far as like overriding BIOSes of GPUs to switch between them and stuff. I cannot go that crazy. He also used industrial motherboards. But for a reasonably off-the-shelf system, even though I'm using dual graphics cards and dual sound cards to achieve it, this is, I think, about the best you can do with multi-booting. If you have a multi-booter that covers a wider range, I'm very curious to see it. Now, there were a couple of operating systems that we didn't have installed, so I'll tell you a little bit about them as a closing note. OS2 Warp, the original, that lended the name of Project Warp to this computer. Unfortunately, the original one doesn't work. It's just too much to ask. You can run things like Ecom Station, they'll work, but you're relying on generic drivers, and I just didn't really have a use case for it, and I like Linux more, so that one got replaced. But you can run it. Like, if you run a more modern OS2, it will work. So for the OS2 Warp fans, sorry, I kept the name because time warping and all that kind of stuff. I just found it a really cool name for this system, and once I name a system, I don't change it. The Windows 3.11, as you could see, it works, but I still need better graphics drivers for it, and that's also really the case with OS2. Like, the OS2 drivers work, but then I don't have drivers in Windows 3.11, and it just makes more sense to run 3.11 directly. Windows NT, it would run on here kind of, but again, trade-offs. You're falling back to generic drivers for the GPUs. Windows 95, also a disaster to run on this kind of era system. I've managed to run it with 95D Lite, but then you're falling back again for the NVIDIA 2 generic drivers. You're then relying on the Voodoo 2. It's just not really the experience that I want. If I can also run 98 and get the same kind of mileage, because I can also just patch my 98 to look like 95 if I really wanted to. So 95 is possible, not that desirable. Now 98 first edition, same story. Like, it just doesn't handle these faster CPUs very well. It doesn't really have good driver support for this system. And then I don't have the community version, so that probably runs worse than 98 does. But then 98 second edition, as you can see, it's a breeze. That's the period where this kind of hardware really starts mattering and kicking off, and what they still supported. So you could tell that I designed this to be the bleeding edge of 98 and then go as high above on top of that, rather than designing something that would still be 95 compatible for that range. Because the moment I start going 95, I'd lose Crysis. So for gaming eras, this was the better choice for me. I know there's other people that go up to Windows XP and then include more old operating systems. Matter of personal preferences, both are really cool Time Machine projects. I hope you liked the video. If you have certain things you want to see on this system, if you have certain driver installations you still want to see for this system, let me know. And I'll see if I can make a video. Thank you for watching.